This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Perhaps nothing from the classical world has triggered the imagination of people over the centuries as the story of Atlantis. Welcome to Iron and Myth. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is our monthly roundtable discussion here on A View from the Bunker, where we tackle various subjects related to the Bible. And you may wonder how this is going to relate, and hope that we can actually show you during this discussion how the writings of Plato may actually be a memory of things from the pre-flood world, and perhaps a twisted memory of what is actually recorded in Scripture. Joining us again this month, the author of Giants, Sons of the Gods, Conspiracy Theory, The Angel of the Lord, and the pastor of the Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado in Boulder, Doug Van Dorn, the best-selling author and award-winning screenwriter, most recently the theological thriller Cruel Logic, Brian Godawa, and the director of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, author of Interview with the Giant, Dr. Judd Burton. Fellas, I really don't know where this conversation is going to go, because there's so many different sources here for information about Atlantis. But the original source, I was surprised when I dug into the writings of Plato, the classical Greek philosopher. There are two conversations recorded, one called Timaeus, another one called Critias, and Critias, excuse me. When you read what's in there, there's a fair amount there, but not as much as I thought, based on the number of movies and books and documentaries that have been written and produced about Atlantis in the years since. Brian, I know you asked me not to ask you any questions here, but let me.
Oh, you get to start.
I'm going to start with you
and
anyway.
You're telling the whole audience. Thanks, Derek.
Well, happy to back you up there. But no, as a screenwriter and as a master storyteller, what is it about this story of Atlantis and this land that was condemned by the gods for their ungodly behavior or evil behavior that has captured the imagination over the last 2,400 years?
Yeah, no, it is a good point, because it also, if you think about it, I think the power of it lies in the simple yet profound sort of notion of an older race, an older civilization that was more advanced, not necessarily than us, but just certainly more advanced. And, that's, of course, a really popular theme today, right? Not just in all storytelling, but just in thinking, even the arguments for the Younger Dryas catastrophe. We've talked about Graham Hancock's theory, which really has, some very interesting connections to the Bible, like we've been talking about, right? And so it kind of fits that paradigm well. And that's, of course, what makes me interested as well, because here you have, an ancient person writing in that context, and he's a trusted, philosopher who does not go off on fanciful dreams, right? And he's literally saying, this isn't just myth. This is actually an amazing fiction, or whatever that is true. And so it makes you really curious and interested in the story behind it, right? But it does carry that concept of older civilizations that have been lost, which, I don't know, I think maybe that taps into our notion of primeval ages, lost worlds, lost civilizations. It's just a universal narrative that I think draws all of us. One of the elements of it that I wanted to bring up was just that, of course, that connects with what we talk about here on Iron and Myth is there's one little component that sticks out a couple times in the dialogue, and particularly in the Critias, when he starts to talk about Atlantis, he says, like as we previously stated, concerning the allotments of the gods, that they portioned out the whole earth here into larger allotments and there into smaller, and provided for themselves shrines and sacrifices. Even so, Poseidon took for his allotment the island of Atlantis, etc., right? And, from my perspective, I found that really fascinating and interesting. And there's a couple other places, too, where that reference comes up. But there's that notion of the allotment of the gods that we've talked about. And again, even sort of assumed by this ancient Greek rationalist philosopher. Very fascinating indeed.
Yeah. The text of Critias states that it was 9,000 years since the war took place, the war between Atlantis and a confederation led by Athens, at which the Athenians were able to defeat the Atlanteans who had tried to subjugate all of Africa and all of Europe, and were about to do it when the Athenians were able to turn the tide, defeat the Atlanteans, and send them back home. But this was not related to the later destruction of Atlantis. Interesting that they remembered this war, and of course, dating back 9,000 years from the time of Plato to, well, in history, we're talking about the Younger Dryas and the end of that ice age, and that the time when the sea levels around the world rose. So there may be some more accuracy in this than maybe we're willing to credit it. I mean, I came into this with the idea that Plato was just writing this as an allegory for hubris and don't get above your raisin, as they say in Kentucky, because pride goeth before a fall, to quote the Bible. Doug, what was it about this story that you find intriguing or compelling?
Well, it's I think Brian hit it. It's almost like an archetype that's primordial, that just resonates, not just with me, but with almost everybody. I'm not quite sure why that is. The idea of a golden age in the time long gone. And then as a Christian, trying to think about a golden age, you can talk about Atlantis pre-flood and post-flood, because we're not really sure when the thing actually was around. Some people think that the 9,000 could be like lunar years instead of solar, so a month. So in other words, it could be a lot sooner in history than the Younger Dryas. I tend to think probably the Younger Dryas is the right time. But what's so strange is when you think about that quote Brian gave about the allotment of the gods, and there's a line in that begins that. It says, once upon a time, the gods were taking over by lot, by allotment, the whole earth according to regions. By just allotments, each god received one of his own, and they settled their countries. And it's like when you read that, you go, this is literally Moses in Deuteronomy 32. It's the exact same language. And there were stories that go back to as far as Justin Martyr, Justin's one of the earliest church fathers that we have, who talked about how it was very likely that probably Solon, who's the ancestor of Plato, came into contact with the writings of Moses. And why wouldn't he? I mean, if he was just coming across the sea, then he probably wouldn't. But if he decided to take the land back from Egypt, where he heard the story, he would have gone right through Canaan. And if he spent any time at all there, he would have learned about Moses. And those fathers are commenting on how similar the language that Plato uses from time to time with what Moses uses. So I just find that completely fascinating. And then, we know that the Deuteronomy 32 worldview is a post-flood thing. Like, this is a Tower of Babel thing. It's not a pre-flood thing. So that just makes me all the more curious. What are we looking at here? Maybe it's not an either or. Maybe it's a both and. Maybe there was a civilization and it was wiped out, and there was a remnant, and then what we remember as the end of Atlantis was the wiping out of the remnant. I mean, I don't know. But how can you not be fascinated by a story that is told by a philosopher, not by like a poet or something like that? And he talks about it as just real history, and this golden age is like, yeah, everybody wants to know about that. I mean, I do. I have a behind me on the right down there by my guitars, that entire row on the bottom is Atlantis books. That's how geeked out I got about this back in the day after I started reading Hancock, and my first foray into it was Stephen Lawhead's Taliesin story, his very first story in the King Arthur series.
Right, which I've read. I've forgotten that.
Yeah, he weaves together the storyline of early Britain and the Bard with Atlantis. That are totally different timelines that all of a sudden, because he has his Atlanteans living thousands of years and not aging, then Taliesin can meet like the kind of princess of Atlantis as they have left the island right before the sinking of it. And
wow.
I mean, that's where I first was like, wow, I got to learn more about this.
I've got to go back and reread Lawhead now, because I read the whole Pendragon cycle, and I read Taliesin, and I actually descend from one of the legendary Welsh knights of King Arthur, a fellow named Cluarc Hain, which means Cluarc the Old. But
why doesn't this surprise me?
Made for a fun show and tell for our daughter in the 4th grade. Hey, look, because he descended from a fellow named Coil Hain, or Old King Cole. So yeah, we're descendants of Old King Cole.
Did he have a merry old soul? Or?
Well, we don't know. We were the younger junior houses, so we didn't inherit any of the land or any of the property. So have no way to know. So this obviously has got some surface level parallels, if not some deeper parallels, with the Bible. And what kind of inspired this topic was an interview we did with a fellow named Micah Van Huss, who hosts a program called Marginal Mysteries for Southwest Radio Church, Southwest Radio Ministries. He wrote a book a few years back called Ancient Cities and the Gods Who Built Them, and he dealt with Atlantis. And pointed out that, as you mentioned, Doug, the gods divvied up the earth according to its regions, but the demigods who populated Atlantis, according to the story, according to Plato, Poseidon and a mortal woman had relations, and she gave birth to 5 sets of male twins, and these were the kings of Atlantis. Well, obviously that those would be the equivalent of the Nephilim. But as time went on, according to the story, as they were farther removed from their divine origin, they became more and more wicked and evil and self-serving, rather than trying to aspire to be like the gods, which is what prompted Zeus, according to Plato, to wipe out the island. So there are some, at least surface level parallels here. And I think it's interesting when you compare this to some of the other Greek writers, like Hesiod, for example, in Works and Days, where he wrote about the gods in Olympus who created a golden race of mortal men who lived in the time of Kronos, when he was reigning in heaven. So this was that golden age, the pre-flood golden age. But after the earth had covered this generation, they are called pure spirits dwelling on the earth. And the phrase there is daemon hagioi, or hagioi. I'm mangling the Greek, I'm sure.
That would be holy spirits, literally. If it's
holy spirits.
Hagia, yeah.
Yeah. And that is where we get the word demon, of course, which is the word that the apostles who wrote the New Testament were inspired to use by the Holy Spirit for the spirits of these demigods that lived during the Golden Age before the flood. And in fact, the phrase that the golden race of mortal men, Amar Anus pointed out in his paper, Were There Greek Rephaim, that phrase moropes anthropoi derives from the same Semitic root word as Rephaim. So you got a Greek poet writing about the same time as Isaiah, so about 300 years before Plato, that the origin of demons were these, the golden race, the ones who lived during the Golden Age, and then Plato about 300 years later, I mean, there's some overlap in the stories here, I guess, between what they're telling and what we read in Scripture.
I was just wanting to add that the notion of the daemon people need to understand that the Greeks used the term as it was not an evil term.
No.
And it basically meant like a territorial spirit, territorial power or authority. And so and I do think that in the New Testament, Christians they demonize the term, right? They do turn it into a evil, wicked term. But it's interesting because Moses, when he's writing Deuteronomy 32:17, and that's that one verse where it talks about how these, is it 17 or is it?
Yeah, it's 17.
Yeah, 17, where he talks about the false gods of Canaan that the Israelites worshipped were Shadim, or demons in English. We have it as demons. And that word Shadim actually is an Akkadian equivalent that has to do with territorial powers.
Right.
And that's not to say that Moses didn't see it as negative, because contextually he did, but he's pointing out a nuance that I don't think is readily apparent when you're just reading, oh, the gods of Canaan are demons. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Because they're not, right. But no, it's actually like they're actually territorial powers and authorities who are being overthrown by Joshua and his armies.
Yeah, and I think a case can be made that conflict is continuing to this day. But let's I digress. We won't go there. Got to point out, we just got a note from Judd Burton that the system that we use to record these programs keeps kicking him off. And so he's said apparently whatever's going on with his system is just not compatible with what we're using to record. So we're going to have to continue the rest of the program without Dr. Cowbell this month, sadly. Hopefully we can get him set up when we do next month's program. So what has been the influence of Atlantis? I mean, I know that we've got, Doug, you're probably better equipped to speak to this because I was never really that taken with it. I mean, the Arthurian myth, was fascinating to me, but the Atlantean stuff, like I said, that completely went by me. I didn't even pay attention. Why? I mean, how has that influenced our culture or even our philosophy, occult teachings for that matter?
Occult teachings, yeah. I mean, there's so much going on in that question, I think.
Yeah, why has the occult taken such an interest in Atlantis?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
That's the one I should have asked.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to figure out exactly why, I think. We know that Madame Blavatsky, back in the late 19th century, was supposedly like channeling entities from Atlantis, and so she comes up with all this kind of occult stuff that connects to it. And I don't have necessarily a problem that's actually probably true. And then, of course, Edgar Cayce adds to that in the, a few decades later. And both of these people are profoundly into the cult. And it makes me wonder, like, I know that there was some interest in Atlantis prior to those two. I have a book on, I think it's Francis Bacon. And I think it was actually the last show,
Atlantis. Brian,
that we did when Derek, you were there at the hotel when we did for Paranormal, and we were all there live together. And we were talking about Isaac Newton. As I recall, there might have been a little bit of overlap going on with Atlantis. There was some weird occult stuff, I guess, going on in the minds of some of these people where they were kind of trying to rebuild Atlantis in the New World.
Yeah.
And so America itself has kind of got this weird tie-in to this myth from some of the founders who were trying to bring it back or whatever. So, our particular nation has some pretty deep roots with this mythology, and particularly the darker sides of it. So I think that, those are some of the roots of it. I'm not entirely sure as to why, other than maybe there could be something real going on if they really were like channeling entities that had something to do with this. I don't theologically have a problem with that. She could have been making the whole thing up for all I know. I have no idea. But if there is, as a Christian, again, looking at the Golden Age, the way that they talk about it, I look at the Golden Age and I go, it was the exact opposite of that.
Exactly.
You know, especially if we're looking pre-flood. I mean, this is not something that the Bible holds up as a place that you want to be back at. And it's something I want to learn about. Like when I die, the first thing I'm going to say to God is, are you offering a class on what happened before the flood? Because I want to be the first to sign up for that class. I want to know.
Yeah,
I'll be up, my hands will be like Hermione.
Yeah, Sharon and I are going to volunteer for internships in the archives.
But, you know, it's like what Plato and so many of these other Greek writers, even Roman writers, are talking about with this golden age. It's the exact opposite for us. So when some occultist comes along and then that maybe gets hijacked by the New Age movement or the Age of Aquarius stuff or whatever, in more modern times even than them, like I think that it's quite important that we have some things to say about this story.
Yeah,
don't you think too that the occult, you know, is always highly rooted in Gnostic worldviews that are always seeking for secret knowledge, and so it certainly appeals to the concept of, oh, an ancient civilization that had, you know, was much more advanced and had secret knowledge that we, you know, it sort of becomes the embodiment of that actual Gnostic worldview of the pursuit of secret knowledge, you know, and at least on a shallow level, you know, I can see that interest drawing them.
Well, Blavatsky wrote in her magnum opus, which was titled The Secret Doctrine, which she claimed was channeled from a prehistoric book called the Book of Zion. Critics accused her of plagiarizing that. She wrote, and I quote, Lemuria, which is another lost continent. Lemuria was the homeland of humanity, the place of the first creation. Further, there were to be 7 root races ruling the earth in succession, of which humanity today was only the 5th. The 4th of these races were the Atlanteans, who were destroyed by black magic. Lemuria would rise and fall to spawn new races until the 7th root race, perfect in every way, would take its rightful place as master of the world. Now, the comic aspect of this is that Lemuria was, and she wrote this around 1888. In 1864, there was a zoologist named Philip Sclater who had noticed that there were primate fossils that you could find in Madagascar and in India. But there's a lot of ocean between Madagascar and India. So he said, okay, there must have been a continent that sank below the ocean at some point. We'll call it Lemuria for the lost lemurs. And yet, Blavatsky took this 20 years later, put it in her teachings, and it is still sort of accepted. Now there's a third lost continent called Mu, M-U, which was supposed to be in the Pacific somewhere.
But a bunch of cows there?
I could
It's
be.
M-U, not M-O-O.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's
I see the
Mu.
point.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, the idea that we're trying to get back to a golden age, we really see this woven through a lot of occult teachings today, this idea that we can somehow get back to that, that we can somehow build heaven here on earth. I mean, the Roman poet Virgil, with his alleged prophecy of a return to a golden age where Saturn returns, returns old Saturn's reign with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. This is actually kind of echoing this whole idea.
You know, even Plato himself, as he's writing the Republic, is giving this utopia idea. It's kind of a proto-communist thing. It's definitely not full-blown communism by any stretch of the imagination. He's actually has some free market stuff in there too, but nevertheless, he's giving a utopia, and I think that's one of the reasons why people think when they read Atlantis that he's continuing a utopia that never existed. I do think that it was a real place. In fact, one of the reasons why I think that you find people looking for Atlantis everywhere is because it was a universal worldwide culture. It's just, that's the thing that makes the most sense to me. There was probably a headquarters to it, you know, and that had these the ring circular city or whatever. That could be the Recot structure for all I know, or it could be at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean for all I know.
Yeah, we've seen a number of claims here in recent years. There's one that says it's just off the coast of Spain, another just published last week or about 2 weeks ago, that it's off the north coast of Australia. which would not seem to be consistent with Plato's description that it was just past the Pillars of Hercules, which are the Straits of Gibraltar.
But if Lemuria and Mu and Atlantis are all kind of, assuming they're contemporary with one another, and they might even be sharing technology or cultures with one another, then you have this kind of worldwide system.
Network.
Network, which is what Graham Hancock is. That's kind of been his program, for 30 years, is to try and argue that this is exactly what you find. So it doesn't surprise me. And that is the dream of whether you're a Karl Marx, wanting to have or a Joseph Stalin wanting to be the dictator over it all. It doesn't really matter. Or if you're a Blavatsky, or if you're
an Elon Musk,
or a Noel Harari, whatever his name is, or if you're a New Age of Aquarius, Fifth Dimension singer group, it doesn't really matter. They're all kind of going after the same thing, and all of it is opposed to a biblical worldview of the past and of the future, because it's really a denial at the end of the day of human sinfulness, which is totally ironic because the whole place was destroyed because of human sinfulness, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I went back and I reread some articles that I had saved almost 20 years ago now. Doug Elwell, I'd mentioned, writer of the author of the book Planet X, had published an online magazine back in 2002, 3, 4, back in that range, called Mysterious World. And he did a series of 4 articles on Atlantis and then 4 on a hypothetical civilization headed up by the Athenians called Osiria, based on the name of the god Osiris. And, a lot of it is speculative, and he gets into some of the information that Edgar Cayce supposedly channeled about Atlantis in the 1930s and 40s. There, again, when you read through the stuff from Plato and you get some of the basics there, but a lot of the other stuff that comes through, and the possibility of a global civilization that involved, which again is part of the story in Plato, that the Atlanteans wanted to conquer what was then Europe and Africa, and they were stopped by the Athenian army, is intriguing. And this kind of would explain some of the pre-flood megalithic structures, or structures that appear to be pre-flood based on the age of them, and with, for example, the Great Pyramid at Giza, what appears to be water erosion along the sides of the pyramid, which wouldn't have happened within the last 5,000 years. So is it possible that what Plato was recording here may have been orally transmitted stories of things that actually were, dim memories of what had happened in the pre-flood era?
I mean, that's what he reports, right? He reports that his ancestor Solon went down to Egypt, and somehow he met with these Egyptian priests who are sitting there chiding him as a Greek, for not knowing history. And they're like, well, let us tell you where you come from. And so that's how kind of the whole thing is set up, is this Greek philosopher who's just kind of a world traveler wanting to know stuff, meets these secret priests of Egypt, and they give him the history of where they came from. And, as people that fled the catastrophe themselves, and they just happened to remember it. And they had told this oral story for whatever the 9,000-year period actually means, which, whatever it is, it's a long time. I mean, that's what he tells you. So it's kind of like, I don't know why you shouldn't take him at face value. He tells this story very differently than he tells the Republic. So
he also recounts a number of destructive floods. Let's see. Earthquakes occurred simultaneously with the third of the disastrous floods which preceded the destructive deluge in the time of Deucalion. Deucalion being the Greek equivalent of Noah. But in its former extent at an earlier period, and then he goes back to describe how the land of Greece was much more fertile back in the day and not quite as rocky but a lot of the soil, apparently, because of numerous global floods, had a lot of the topsoil washed away. You mentioned the reshot structure, and I think we ought to probably get into that, because that seems like a really intriguing candidate for the location of Atlantis. It's especially because it's not underwater.
Right.
It's called.
But it was at one point in time, and all you have to do is go look at your Google Earth to see that.
Right.
Yeah.
Reshot, if you want to look it up, is RICHAT. You can also search for Eye of the Sahara, and you can find it pretty easily on Google Earth. It, dimension-wise, is not that, it's pretty close to what Plato described.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Micah Van Huss mentioned during the interview, which I thought was really intriguing, again, it was supposedly ruled by 5 sets of demigod twins, and to this day, apparently, the place on Earth with the highest percentage of twins per capita is Mauritania, which is where this structure is located. So this still to this day. Now, I don't know how that would be possible if it was still, post-flood. I mean, if the Atlantis was destroyed in the flood, how would that transfer over into the modern world? But just an interesting little bit of information. It is an intriguing looking structure from space. I not a geologist, so I can't imagine how something like that could occur naturally.
Yeah, I mean, scientists have kind of tried to give explanations for it as some sort of like volcanic activity that kind of imploded in on itself or whatever.
And then uplifts.
Uplifted, yeah. So kind of do that a couple different times. So, I mean, maybe. If people want to find out about, kind of get the backstory behind this, it's a fellow named Bright Insight, his channel on YouTube. He has 4 or 5 episodes kind of devoted to the Recot structure, which are really, really interesting at the very least. None of the books that I have over on my bookshelf talk about that at all. And so then when you see this guy come up, there's a reason why his channel just absolutely exploded, because this was probably the most unique thing that I've heard of. I mean, there's some pretty wild stories out there in Antarctica, and using, you remember the mechanism that they use in 2012, the catastrophe movie, of Earth crust displacement? Well, they get this from a guy named Charles Hapgood, who, or Hapgood, one of the two, who knew Einstein, and Einstein kind of wrote forward to his book about this theory of the Earth's crust that was kind of like a skin of an orange, that at certain times, for whatever reason, the whole crust of the Earth could shift like 180 degrees. And all of a sudden, Antarctica, which was, maybe at the Tropic of Cancer or something, all of a sudden just floats down to the bottom of the Earth. And so, I don't know what to make of that kind of stuff. Was there ever a civilization in Antarctica? I mean, maybe. I don't have a problem with it. But there's nothing quite like the recut structure itself. There's nothing like it on Earth. And here it is in the middle of a desert that's clearly been washed away by some kind of a gigantic tidal wave flood.
Yeah.
And there's just no question about that. And so definitely worth people looking into, I think.
Yeah. And again, the timing seems to fit with the description of Plato of it, happening 9,000 years previously, or at least the war, which apparently must have been sometime around or just before the time that the flood swept over the earth and washed everything away. So at least
it's also worth noting that the Sahara Desert was not a desert. It hasn't been a desert forever. It was very lush. It's like, go farther south into Africa today, the Congo and stuff like that. Many people lived there. There was river systems everywhere. Like, it kind of has the geographical elements to it that Plato describes, which is one of the reasons why it really is an intriguing thing. And it's even possible that it was by the sea at one point in time.
And it wasn't really all that long ago in terms of geologic time. I mean, 5,000-6,000 years ago, it was the Sahara forest, the Sahara jungle. This speaks to something I interviewed a fellow about who's a catastrophist, but he's also part of the team that was excavating at the site in Jordan called Tal El Hammam. Sodom, basically. He was working with the Comet Research Team, the group that trying to look at what happened at Tunguska 100 years ago and how we might predict and prevent something like that from happening again. He wrote a paper based on what they'd excavated at Tal el Hammam, where the temples, as they would in the ancient world, the ancient Near East, always open, to the east. So the doors always face due east. But they noticed as they excavated several levels of this temple that it shifted back and forth 6, 10, 12 degrees. And that would indicate that the orbital axis of the Earth had shifted a little bit, which moved the what they call the horse latitudes up and down a little bit. In fact, even within the span of recorded history, where Israel, excuse me, this autoimmune thing affects my voice, went from being very lush and green to a drought because the axis shifted, and so the prevailing winds, the horse latitudes, would change, and that probably had some impact on the Sahara Desert and the Sahara Forest and its transition from one to the other and back again over the span of history. But oh gosh, there was something I was going to ask now, and I'm completely forget. Oh, here it is. Atlas, who was one of the according to the older myths, he was one of the Titans. He was the one who was basically condemned to hold up the earth on his back forever. But according to Plato, Atlas was one of the one of the 5 sets of twins born to Poseidon and the...
Wasn't he the first king of Atlantis or something?
He was. First king of Atlantis had the name of Atlas. Now, okay, maybe this is a different Atlas, just named for the Titan who was holding up the earth. Who knows? But the mountain range near the Rishat structure in Mauritania to this day is still called the Atlas Mountains. And what's even more interesting is that when they've done analysis of the rocks, the geology of the Atlas Mountains, they found that at some point in the dim history of the earth, the Atlas Mountains and the Appalachians were connected.
Interesting.
I think I've heard that before. That's wild.
The other thing related to that was, and I got this from watching Bright Insight as well. But what I found interesting was that what was I thinking? Atlas. I lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys.
We get to a certain age, Sharon and I run into this. We realize we have a thought. We have to, even if we have to interrupt the other one, we've got to get it out there so we don't forget. Okay.
It came back. Oh, man.
Hurry up, or it's going to go away again.
Oh, yeah. Herodotus. Just remind me of Herodotus. Again, we love the ancient stuff, and he points out that Herodotus, a famous ancient Greek historian, a respected one. In fact, he's like the father of history, right? And he has a map. And on the map, right in the area around Mauritania, it's called Atlantis.
Yeah,
and it's like, wow. And the Atlas Mountains there as well. And that I found very intriguing because there you go. There's something that's, who would have made that up in the ancient world that's where Atlas, where that's where Atlantis might be, right? So that was pretty fascinating to me.
Especially again, when you look at it on the, being part of Africa and thinking that beyond the Pillars of Hercules would mean somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
So,
but it doesn't have to be that far out in the Atlantic Ocean. It could be the Azores, which are kind of, relatively speaking, just off the coast of Africa. And if they were kind of the last remnant of this bigger island, that's kind of Randall Carlson's theory, is that there was this huge uplift or sinking of the land, it kind of at that mid-Atlantic ridge thing that just engulfed the whole thing. But it's not that far away from where you find that Atlantis on that map. Either way, we're kind of circling right around the same general vicinity on Earth. But
yeah, and interestingly, even though Randall Carlson does not believe the Rishat structure is Atlantis, he actually says, you know what, it might be, part of that extended kingdom of Atlas. I'm sorry, of Atlantis, right? Which is what all of them sort of are acknowledging, that, it was a kingdom of multiple cities, and they could have been in these various areas, and so we don't know what their structures may have looked like.
I mean, you can imagine a very, very powerful empire that had a base. Like, let's say it was out off the Canary Islands in some bigger landmass. And then it's like the dominant military power of this side of the globe at the very least. And so it gets its fingers into Cuba and into Peru and up into Britain, maybe even down into Antarctica. I mean, for all I know, that makes a lot of sense. And so you would find a cultural similarities that remind people of Atlantis and the things that they're reading. And so in their minds, they're like, well, this must be Atlantis, when the reality is it doesn't have to be Atlantis, but it could be the influence of that worldwide civilization. And isn't this the reason why God says he's going to destroy the whole earth? It's not like he's just destroying one tiny little area.
Right, one island.
This is like, I'm not one of these guys that thinks the local flood thing makes a whole lot of sense, because why do you need the animals to get onto an ark when all they have to do is just go over the next hill and avoid the flood? I don't understand that with my brain. But if it's a worldwide catastrophe of however that mechanism works, then the Atlantis story fits that really, really well.
Mm-hmm. And I have to remind myself of this when you're looking at a map and you see the Azores, these little, dots in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, that if back in the day this was part of a big landmass, those would have been the mountains on this landmass.
Mm-hmm. The tops of the mountains, yeah.
Or the tops of mountains, which Plato said is where they put the castle and the temple of Poseidon and in all of this. What's interesting, a friend of ours who's of Portuguese descent, Bill Medeiros, went to Israel with us back in 2019. He visited the Azores and found that there's a lot of megalithic structures there that the Portuguese government says, no, those aren't dolmens. That's just natural rock formations. Nothing to see here. Move along. So yeah, there's some stuff there on the Azores that deserves some exploration, just like on the island of Sardinia with the tombs of the giants, or like on Malta with some of the megalithic structures there, which if the Mediterranean had been, and this was what Doug Elwell postulated in his series on Ossyria, that the Mediterranean Sea at the time was the Mediterranean Valley, and that the Nile River, when it emptied into the Mediterranean, just continued on westward and finally came out as a waterfall at the Straits of Gibraltar into what was then the Atlantic Ocean, but of course was a much lower level. And that valley was a very lush, fertile valley that provided for, all of the people of, Europe, North Africa, et cetera, and so on, until the waters came up, and then suddenly the Straits of Gibraltar became the gateway through which the Atlantic flooded the valley and turned it into the Mediterranean Sea. So, but he speculated that the island of Malta, because of its really intriguing megalithic structures, might have been the center of the Ossyrian kingdom headed up by the Athenians in the story of Plato. So
I wish I would have known about those megalithic structures on Malta when I went to visit the islands, the island many years ago for a screenplay I was actually writing about the Knights of Malta. So I was into all the castle stuff. If I would have known, I didn't know about the megaliths though. I wish I would have gone.
Oh yeah, and there are stories that go back a long time in Malta too about the existence of giants on Malta. There's one of the ancient temples, I can't even pronounce it, but it basically means place of the giants. So between Malta and I imagine if we started digging, you could probably find the same thing on Sicily, but certainly on Sardinia with the tombs of the giants, like 200 of them on Sardinia. So not uncommon in and around the Mediterranean, at least in certain parts of it. So what do we take away from Atlantis, and why, again, still this fascination, even in the 21st century, with adventurers trying to find it? What is, I mean, as Christians, I'm like, okay, if we found it someday, that'd be fine, but don't really care. Yeah. Well, why is there this drive to try to find this? I mean, is there something more than just, hey, wouldn't it be cool to find evidence of a lost golden age?
There's a couple of things. My mind goes to something Judd might bring up here about finding the body of Gilgamesh, or some of these other god kings of the past, which supposedly have been unearthed, and they're finding their tombs and whatever. And it's almost like an Indiana Jones thing where we can harness some sort of ancient sacred power and use it.
It's always power.
Yeah, it's always power. So that's one of the reasons why people probably continue to look for it, just like they do the Ark of the Covenant or whatever else. When I was reading all these books, there was kind of two kind of books. There was those who were looking for the place, which is just a fascinating archaeology kind of exploration. But then there's people who use it very deliberately and subversively to some sort of a new age, usually, agenda. Some of those books are so disgusting. You just have to put them down because of how occultic they are and how it's so tied to this story. Like we said earlier, that's such a bizarre thing. And to me, as Christians, this is probably the main driving reason why I kind of went down this rabbit trail for a while, so many years ago, just trying to understand what is going on with the occult, and how could a Christian talk and speak into that and help these people see that what they're looking for is not what they think it is. It's really the opposite, and that the biblical worldview has a very different answer to what a golden age is, when it will be, how it is brought in. And, if you have an entire civilization, being driven by a similar impulse with artificial intelligence merging with humanity, or whatever it is that is the next thing, it's all related, I think, mythologically to this story, and a perversion of what real history is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, you got the Blavatskyites who are still with us today, the Theosophists who think that we're still waiting for that seventh root race to emerge from Lemuria.
There are spiritual rivers that, are going through some things, some ideas, some worldviews and this is one of them. I think you make a great point.
Yep. Atlantis, will it ever be found? And does it really matter? Well, he's one of the things that we will know someday when we are able to get that job that we've applied for in the Heavenly Archives in the New Jerusalem. We're looking forward to that.
Search for Jesus.
There we go.
Not
Amen.
Atlantis.
Amen. Brian Godawa, Doug Van Dorn, thank you. And hopefully next month, we'll have Dr. Judd Burton back with us. But until then, fellas, really enjoyed it. Thanks again. Check the show notes below, whether you're watching or listening, and you'll find links to the websites for Brian Godawa, Doug Van Dorn, and yes, even Dr. Judd Burton, although he was unable to join us this month. We've been kind of bird dogging the trouble behind the scenes, and I think we got that figured out so that Judd will be back with us next month for our next episode of Iron and Myth. Coming up, Shakespeare once wrote, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Apparently, that's especially true if you try and do it at a Coldplay concert. We'll talk about that, and also a special announcement about our upcoming tour of Israel in October. If you're planning on coming with us, please stick around. More from A View from the Bunker straight ahead. You were born on a battlefield. Now, see where this long war began and where it ends. Israel. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert and special guest Carl Tykrib in the Holy Land this October, where you'll see things like this. Jerusalem. Israel's Stonehenge, Gilgal Rephaim. The Temple Mount. Joshua's altar. Shiloh and the red heifers. And the gates of hell. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert and special guest researcher, author, and lecturer Carl Teichgrib in Israel, October 19th through 30th, 2025. This is not the typical tour of Israel. For information and to reserve your place on the 2025 Gilbert House Tour of Israel, please log on to gilberthouse.org/travel. That's gilberthouse.org/travel. Driving the internet to think. From the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us at VFTB.net. That's our home website, where it's been since 2009, actually. You'll also find us on social media, X at View from Bunker, at Derek Gilbert, at Gilbert House _TV. Please subscribe to all of those. Follow us on Facebook, the View from the Bunker page there. Truth Social and Gab, we're there as well, at Derek P. Gilbert. And on YouTube, the channel there is at Gilbert House. Please subscribe, share, click the bell for notifications, hit that like button, and leave your comments below. And then we ask you to download our free mobile app to your smartphone or tablet, which not only bypasses the gatekeepers of big tech, it has a bunch of other features, like a calendar of our upcoming events, including Bible studies, conferences, tours. It's got a very active group in the messaging section. That's the little talk bubbles at the top right corner there. Please join in on the discussions there. And we've also got Bible with multiple translations, audio Bible, and more. It's available for iOS, Android, and Amazon Kindle Fire devices. We got links to those app stores at gilberthouse.org/app. You can also download our video version to your smart TV, whether it's Android TV, Google TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV. Go to their app store, look for the Gilbert House Ministries channel, add that to your smart TV, and we will be there whenever you click the remote. But again, please get our app. You'll find all of the information and links to the app stores at gilberthouse.org/app. Well, it was a really rough week for the CEO of a tech company from Boston, the company called Astronomer. The CEO, Andy Byron, decided to take the director of human resources to a Coldplay concert. And the complication here is that the human resources director, whose name is Kristen Cabot, and Mr. Byron are married to other people. And at the concert, they got caught on the Jumbotron kiss cam. And this has gone viral on the internet. If you haven't seen it yet, you probably will. You can find it on YouTube, on X, on Facebook. They have become a viral internet meme, which is tragic in the sense that you're watching this couple see their lives disappear in the span of a few seconds. When they look up at the Jumbotron and they're kind of following as the camera pans around. They do this at baseball games all the time. And you see couples on the kiss cam, and then they turn and they kiss. And except this couple, when the camera hit them and they realized they were on camera in front of thousands of people, some of whom might know their spouses, or They immediately, Mr. Byron took a dive behind the row of seats in front of him, and Ms. Cabot turned around and covered her face with her hands. Too late, of course. They have gone viral. And, of course, Coldplay's frontman even called them out and said, "Oh, look at them. Either they're having an affair or they're really shy." Well, sadly, the former is true. And there is no telling the kind of shame that the two of them are feeling. But, if you're going to cheat on your spouse, don't do it somewhere where you might end up on camera in front of thousands of potential witnesses, especially. Now, there's a report that that both of them may be married but living apart from their spouse. It doesn't really matter, because when it comes to division of marital property, judges tend not to look kindly on people who are already engaged in another relationship before the former one is already ended. So it is rough. Mr. Byron has tendered his resignation as the board of directors of Astronomer. launched an investigation after this went viral. He is now out. Don't know about the employment status of Ms. Cabot. I would suspect that she will soon be looking for other employment as well. The memes have been entertaining. Again, I don't want to make light of the self-inflicted shame and pain that they brought upon themselves, but at the Philadelphia Phillies game night before last, as I'm recording this on Saturday, the Philly Fanatic, which is, the green costumed mascot of the Philadelphia Phillies, staged the Coldplay event with another Philly Fanatic, but wearing a blonde wig like Ms. Cabot. And of course, they had it set with the camera crew there at Veterans Stadium, one couple on the kiss cam and then another couple, and then suddenly the Philly Fanatic and diving for cover. And of course, the audience, the crowd there at Veterans Stadium got the joke. So again, I would just say the lesson here, kids, is if you're going to cheat on your spouse, first of all, don't cheat on your spouse. I think that is the main lesson here. But number two, if you're going to do it, don't do it in front of thousands of witnesses. Bless their pointy little heads. An important announcement about our upcoming tour of Israel. Sadly, because of events beyond our control, beyond the control of Carl and Leanne Teichrieb, they will not be able to join us in Israel in October. There was a fire in the small community near which they live, Plumas, Manitoba, and this speaks to the character of Carl Teichrieb. He's got a building in that community where he's got a library, his research library, which is the size of a fairly well-stocked small-town library. I mean, he's got library shelving in there and thousands upon thousands of books researching the kind of thing that he writes and talks about, which is, if you've read his book, Game of Gods, which I encourage you to do, the kind of research that he does. It is a deep dive research, and he's just got he's got a library that would be the envy of some small colleges, I think. Well, the community of Plumas had a fire that burned down the general store, and it was the main source of groceries and other necessities for people in that community and in the surrounding farmland, which was really the only source of goods for miles around. Unlike here in the Ozarks, where we've got a town about every 10 miles, which means there's a Dollar General about every 10 miles. There in Manitoba, if you can't get into Plumas, and in the wintertime, you might not be able to travel very far anyway, just because of the harsh winters up there in Canada, you may have to go to halfway to Winnipeg, which is 50 miles away, I think, to get to a grocery store. So the only other building in Plumas after this general store burned down that's big enough to house a replacement is the building that Carl and Leanne own for Carl's reference library, his research library. So when I called him the other day and said, hey, okay, here's the status, the update of where what's coming up in October, he said, well, let me tell you what I'm doing. I'm in the process of boxing up my books. Like, okay. And so we talked about it for a bit, and he said, well, maybe it's best that we not try to travel this fall anyway, because not only does he have to box up all of his books and then move them to another storage facility, they've got to find a place to put the books where they're not going to be at danger of being damaged by damp or insects or whatever. So we will look at our spring tour next year. We do have dates for that. We'll be announcing the dates of our 2026, spring 2026 Israel tour. And hopefully the Teichriebs will be able to join us. We will have Doug Van Dorn and Dr. Judd Burton joining us for certain. But again, we'll announce those dates soon. And yes, the tour in October is on, despite the recent conflicts there between Israel and Iran, and things that are going on now on the Syria side of the Israeli border. But, if that changes and we need to reschedule things, so just say again, Lipkin Tours has had to deal with this in the past as we went through the pandemic. We had to reschedule our 2023 tour 4 times before we finally got it over to Israel. And if new dates do not work for you, your deposit will be refunded. So if you're interested in going with us, you can put down your deposit without fear of losing it. And you can find more information at our website. That's gilberthouse.org/travel, gilberthouse.org/travel. Next weekend, this coming weekend, Sharon and I will be in Ohio for the annual Go Therefore conference. This is in suburban Dayton, Brookville, Ohio, the Harvest Revival Center. And we are honored to be part of this lineup. Pastor Carl Gallups, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. Igal German will be joining us. He is the co-founder and CEO of the International Biblical Apologetics Association, Messianic believer, and one who feels very strongly in defending the faith and giving, teaching people the reasons that we can know that we know that we know that our faith is true. So we're looking forward to meeting Igal face to face for the first time. He's been a guest on this program several times. He's contributed to some of the Skywatch TV virtual conferences, and I am honored to serve on the board of directors for the IBAA, as does Dr. Mike Spalding, who is the organizer of the Go Therefore conference. So we encourage you to join us there. Other speakers include Casper McLeod, our good friend from Georgia, from the UK by way of Georgia, Tom Dunn, David Hevner, and Kenny C. and Vicki Joy Anderson. So we encourage you to join us there. Now, if you can't be there, streaming video is available, and you can get access to the video stream for just $39. In-person attendance, $59. More information and registration at gothereforeconference.com. That's gothereforeconference.com. And what perfect timing. Mike Kerr calling in just as I'm getting ready to talk about the Remnant Rising Conference. Call you back in a minute, Mike. This will be in Springfield, Missouri, on, August 22nd through 24th. That is in our backyard. We're looking forward to a conference that we can drive to. We hope you join us there. This will feature just about all of us from Skywatch TV. Joe Artis Horn, the host of Skywatch TV, Donna Howell, host of the Donna Howell program, and Nita Horn, who is the CEO of Whispering Ponies Ranch. And, of course, Sharon and me. Between the 5 of us, you pretty much got most everybody from Skywatch TV. And a lot of our friends will be there. Jamie Walden, one of the most dynamic speakers you'll ever encounter. Vicki Joy Anderson will be there. Tracy Tennant, who is now living here in the Ozarks. Kevin Shipp, former CIA officer with a very interesting story. Dave Hodges, host of the Common Sense Show. And who is Nathan Reynolds? Nathan Reynolds, who will be joining us there as well. I have not met Nathan, but I understand he's got a very, very interesting story. Spiritual warfare, and somebody who's got hands-on experience in that realm. Also, Mondo de la Vega will be joining us. Mondo coming from, of course, the Jim Baker Show, and he's got a story to tell as well. He was in, gangs in Los Angeles and got saved out of that life and is now preaching the gospel. So, fascinating group, and we hope you can join us there in Springfield, Missouri. We're happy to show you why we enjoy living here in the Ozarks. If you can't attend, streaming video is available, and you can find out more and sign up at hearthewatchmen.com. That is hearthewatchmen.com. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen, as the case may be. If you are listening, please subscribe. We're at Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, basically wherever fine podcasts are sold. And please give us a like and a follow our Facebook page, View from the Bunker. Our announcer, the inimitable D.C. Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, not commercial, no derivatives, 4.0 international license. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Good night, Oliver, wherever you are. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is A View from the Bunker.